Our story begins on a dark and turbulent flight. Sonic and Tails would be struggling to keep the tornado out of the water, and fortunately they would manage to spot land, but with a surprise twist. The twist being that the classic Death Egg was found on this landmass. This was Eggman's massive ship that he used to attempt to conquer the world in Sonic 3 and Knuckles. However, the duo would have no time to take it in for much longer as the tornado would suffer a strike from a lightning bolt, causing them to come crashing down. Eventually, Sonic would awake after this crash in a dark room filled with destroyed Badniks. Not only that, but his foot is injured and placed inside of a metallic hold. Sonic would find Tails' computer tablet and head out searching for his friend. Though something lurks in the dark, watching Sonic as he explores the desolate halls of the Death Egg. These halls would be full of surprises, as Sonic would discover a room holding a sunflower in a capsule. Though Tails wouldn't be here, Sonic would continue to search, not noticing that there was a figure hiding in the darkness. Finally, Sonic would find the most surprising discovery of them all, the egg carrier, which was seen all the way back in Sonic Adventure. Along with the egg carrier, Sonic would discover a damaged Coconut's Badnik, which would crawl out of the shadows and reveal that its lower half is that of a caterpillar. With that, a myriad of Chimera-esque Badniks would appear, and Sonic would be backed into none other than Mecha Sonic. Even though Mecha Sonic is looking pretty worse for wear here, with Sonic's injured foot, he wouldn't stand a chance against this fleet of discarded machines. And so, Sonic would give chase, and in a last-ditch effort, he would hide inside of a capsule. However, he would be shortly discovered by Mecha, and utilizing a piece of scrap metal, Sonic would surf down the hallway before being interrupted by a damaged E100 bot. Though, much to Sonic's confusion, these bots actually wouldn't be out here to hurt him, and, of all people, Tails would be with them. Tails would explain that these bots, dubbed Scrapniks, actually rescued the duo after their crash and built a brace for Sonic's broken foot. We would learn that the leader of these Scrapniks is E117 Sigma, who would lead everyone to the surface now that the storm has subsided. Once on the surface, we would be introduced to Scrapnik Island, a civilization created from recycled and repurposed robots fought throughout all of Sonic's adventures. We would learn that Sigma washed ashore years ago and would find himself stranded on this deserted island. But it wouldn't be long before Sigma made use of all the destroyed robots found throughout the island, and this would eventually include Mecha Sonic. When Mecha was found, he was not in great shape, but thankfully, Sigma was able to work his magic and get him back on his feet. Here on Scrapnik Island, Mecha Sonic would aid Sigma in the rebuilding process of the egg carrier, and he would be embraced with open arms by his fellow Scrapniks in a true sense of community and belonging. Now, let's just quickly rewind a little bit to when we met the Coconut's Caterkiller hybrid. In the background, we can see what is clearly the head of a caterpillar on another body. Maybe he wanted to fly after an eternity of being grounded, but to me it just kind of makes more sense to give the caterpillar his body, but maybe I'm overthinking things and looking too deep into this and they just wanted to play into the horror elements. Speaking of horror, something would end up frying in Mecha Sonic's mind for just a brief moment, causing his visor to turn red as he seems to be struggling with something on a mental level. On top of that, as if things weren't bad enough, there's an ominous Mecha Knuckles wearing the iconic Knuckles hat watching from the distance, and so I guess that's where the hat from the Sonic OVA has been hiding for all this time. While resting his leg on the beach, Sonic would get a surprise in the form of a talking Scrapnik. It turns out that Tails invented a translator that would decrypt Scrapnik communication into an understandable language. With this gift, every Scrapnik would now have the chance to say hello to Tails, which is honestly quite cute. Though Sigma would be interested in this, Mecha Sonic would once again unexpectedly glitch out when he sees Tails' tablet. But there wouldn't be time to really dwell on this, as Sigma would announce that there is some good news and there is also some bad news. The good news is that the damage done to the tornado is only superficial and it can be easily repaired. However, the bad news is that their integrated drive generator, the part that makes the electricity for the tornado, is damaged beyond repair. Though, in a turn of good news, luckily, Sigma knows where they can find a spare part. Sonic, Sigma, and Mecha would head out while Tails would stay with Sigma's 3 assistants to start repairs on the tornado. On their way to the spare part, Mecha would make a short detour back to the sunflower, and we would learn that this was a flower that washed ashore years ago, and since then, Mecha has been taking care of it in hopes to one day return it to the mainland once the Scrapniks figure out a way to leave the island. Finally, the group would make their way to the egg carrier, which has been aptly named the Scrambled Egg Carrier. Sigma would explain that he has hopes to one day escape the island along with his friends by utilizing this giant carrier and leaving Eggman's shadow both figuratively and literally, considering that they're living inside of a giant egg in the shape of Eggman's head. It's here that the gang would start their search for the missing part, though they're not alone in this dark ship. While searching, Mecha would suddenly grab hold of Sonic as Mecha Knuckles would barge in on the attack. Sonic would learn from Sigma that he could never quite eliminate all of Eggman's original programming, and that Mecha Knuckles was programmed to protect the Master Emerald. So, Sigma, instead of erasing the programming, made a few modifications and altered his program to protect the Scrambled Egg Carrier instead of the Master Emerald. After trying to explain that Sonic is a friend, Mecha Knuckles would still be on the attack, and he would end up punching Sigma and leaving him unconscious. Thus, a pretty awesome battle actually ensues between Mecha Sonic and Mecha Knuckles. With Mecha Knuckles' hat removed, we get a full look at him, and we learn that he's pretty worse for wear. He's missing an eye, and his dreads are also pretty tattered. We would also get to end up seeing the world through Mecha Sonic's eyes after taking a hit. The figure before him would twist from Mecha Knuckles into Knuckles and then to Sonic, who would begin to berate him and call him trash as he threatens to beat in his brains. Mecha Sonic would attempt to hit this glitched out Sonic, only to then see Dr. Eggman, who would go on about how Mecha is his greatest creation to date, before getting his stomach punched in by Knuckles with the word trash echoing through his mind. Mecha Knuckles would make his way towards Sonic, ready to finish him off, before, luckily, Mecha Sonic snapped out of it and grabbed him from the shadows, and in a devastating spin dash, Mecha Knuckles would be completely destroyed. Though, it wouldn't really be time to celebrate for Sonic, as it turns out, Mecha Sonic would end up rushing at Sonic, and he would grab him by the throat. Everything would end up going black for Sonic, and he would end up waking up strapped down to a table with some kind of strange device on his head. A little Scrapnik by the name of Ben, I'm not joking, that's actually his name, would go running for help. And during this time, Sigma would awaken in the darkness, only to realize the damage that Mecha Sonic had done as he cradles the destroyed Mecha Knuckles. Meanwhile, through what is probably one of the most disgusting means of sharing data, Ben would transmit, through his tongue, what he had seen to Tails. Tails would immediately leap into action, and he'd use some nearby scrap to assemble weapons, and together with the help of the egg robos that he's been hanging out with, whose names by the way are Benedict, Rancheros, and Florentine, comment below if you can see the theme in their names, they would head out and go to save Sonic. Once inside of the Scrambled Egg Carrier, the gang would end up bumping into Sigma, and they would inform him of what had happened while he was out. We would end up learning from Sigma that he kind of struggled, like with Mecha Knuckles, to fully understand the programming behind Mecha Sonic, and while he attempted to eliminate all of Eggman's influence, he didn't quite succeed. He thought that he did a decent enough job, but with Sonic's arrival, something must have triggered inside of Mecha Sonic's mind, causing him to go haywire. Mecha Sonic would then take this moment to hijack Tails' tablet and use it to say that his mind, in fact, has never been more clear, which is exactly what an insane person would say after kidnapping someone. He would end up revealing himself to have been lurking behind them in the shadows. Ultimately, Mecha would be too much to take on. With his speed and his mastery of hiding in the dark, Tails and friends would be forced to retreat. One by one, everyone would be picked off, leaving ultimately Tails all on his own to go one-on-one against Mecha Sonic. Mecha would do the stereotypical villain thing of monologuing about his past. He would talk about how he was at one point Eggman's greatest achievement, and that the world was theirs for the taking. However, after rebooting on Scrapnik Island, he ended up waiting for Eggman to come for him. Because why wouldn't Eggman come for his greatest creation? It was then that Mecha realized that he was abandoned. He was left to rust on this island as nothing else but junk. But since he saw Tails' technology, he could finally right his wrong. And despite Tails' best efforts to shoot upon Mecha Sonic, it would be for naught, and Tails would attempt a spin dash in a last-ditch attempt against Mecha Sonic. However, he would find himself overpowered and ultimately defeated. Mecha would take Tails and launch him into an abyss. Both Tails and Mecha seemingly forgot that Tails can fly, and with that, we would learn Mecha's true plan once he returned to Sonic. He is going to Freaky Friday mind swap both Sonic and himself using a device that Eggman once created in an attempt to control Badniks with his mind. Once swapped, Mecha would then be able to escape the island by using Sonic's increased speed to run across the water, and he would be able to reunite with Eggman to take over the world together. Mecha 100% is truly a man who cannot take being ghosted. Sonic would end up pointing out Mecha's hypocrisy. Sure, his goal was to return to Eggman, but in doing so, he would have to abandon those who took him in, repaired him, and treated him like a friend, and even a family. This would be the same way that Eggman ultimately ended up abandoning Mecha in the past. To this, Mecha would go all brooding anime as he explains that friendship was only a glitch that made him weaker, and that all of these Scrapniks were never his friends. Though little did he know, those very Scrapniks would be watching from the darkness in the rafters. Mecha would begin to start the mind swap process, and he may have actually gotten away with it if not for the fact that he just bashed all of his friends. So all of the Scrapniks would end up intervening. This intervention would cause everything to explode, and ultimately, Mecha's plan had failed as the technology was destroyed. Enraged, Mecha would lunge at all of the bots, and as Sonic awoke from this, he would find a new voice in his mind, an angry voice who desperately wanted to convince everyone, and most importantly himself, that he was not trash. Sonic would be filled with overwhelming anger and sadness before realizing that these emotions aren't his. Though the machine was interrupted, something did happen with this mind-altering process, and it seems that his brain has been linked to Mecha's mind. Despite being injured, Sonic would rush in and save the Scrapniks as he would go toe-to-toe with Mecha. Through his link with Mecha, Sonic would learn that Mecha has been struggling mentally ever since he got here. He lost everything that once gave him value and purpose, and so the two would end up rushing around a giant incinerator in a final battle. Mecha would ultimately leave himself open to an attack, and Sonic would land a blow, causing his cast to shatter and Mecha to fall into the trash below. As Mecha fell, memories of his time with the Scrapniks would return to him. These memories would be shared to Sonic through their link, and Sonic would take this moment to try and rescue Mecha as he got pulled deeper and deeper into the incinerator. Again, Mecha would go on about how he is a failure and ultimately he is just trash. But this would be interrupted by Sonic telling Mecha to cut the crap, which honestly feels way more vulgar than I'm used to my blue boy talking. And he would end up trying to rescue Mecha Sonic. I'm not gonna lie, this scene kinda got to me. I got a little bit teary-eyed. And it also felt a lot like the end scene in the Sonic OVA between Sonic and Metal, which honestly, there's nothing wrong with that. Now, thankfully, Mecha would end up surviving because I don't think my heart could take his death. But it would take a second before he was saved as Sonic's foot was too injured to pull Mecha out. Thankfully though, Tails and the other Scrapniks would be there to save Sonic and Mecha. And with that, Mecha Sonic and the Scrapniks would end up in a big old cuddle puddle once he was pulled out of the incinerator. Sigma would apologize to Mecha for not being aware of the turmoil that Mecha has endured mentally since being on this island, and Sonic would begin to cry as he looks at this. However, we would end up learning that these aren't his tears. They belong to Mecha, which quite frankly is simply adorable. Tails would then aid Sigma in removing the last of Eggman's programming from Mecha Sonic, and also Mecha Knuckles has been repaired and reprogrammed as well, which is great. Finally, Sonic and Tails can leave, but not before Mecha thanks Sonic for showing him that one's existence isn't determined by the success or failure, and that what truly matters is having the courage to press forward. This is honestly a message that I think that a lot of people could benefit from, and it's pretty sweet, I'm not gonna lie. The Scrapniks bid Sonic and Tails adieu as they start living for tomorrow and continue to work on the scrambled egg carrier to hopefully one day get them off of this island. Sonic and Tails would fly off into the sky and their adventures would continue, hopefully to one day cross paths yet again with the Scrapniks. This was honestly a great little story that came out of the IDW Sonic comics, and I've wanted to cover it ever since the first issue dropped over a year ago. I absolutely love the dark, spooky elements found throughout, and of course, I'm a sucker for the corny, sappy message at the end. It just feels like a staple for a Sonic story to end with a message like that. If you enjoyed this video, or if you feel like I missed anything, feel free to leave it a comment. If you really enjoyed it and you feel like it deserved it, feel free to like, subscribe, anything that you feel. At the end of the day though, I can't tell you what to do. Ultimately, I am not your boss. I just hope that you have a good one.